A Long Journey is a poem by a Zimbabwean poet, Musaemura Zimunya, published in the 1985 book Country Dawns and City Lights. A Long Journey is a reflective, dramatic monologue poem written in free verse with no regular rhyme scheme or meter. It has 30 verses broken into 7 stanzas. The first and second stanzas are quatrains or 4 verses. The third stanza is a tercet or 3 verses. The fourth stanza is a couplet or 2 verses. The fifth stanza has 9 verses. The sixth stanza is quinton or 5 verses. The seventh stanza is a couplet or 2 verses. The anonymous speaker of the poem is from Zimbabwe. They have lived in both rural villages and the capital city, Harare. Their life experiences span different periods: British colonial rule, Zimbabwe's fight for independence, and the country's modern-day capital city, Harare. The poem takes place in Zimbabwe, a southern African country, and contrasts different eras: life in traditional rural villages before colonization, life under British rule, which began in 1890 when British colonists arrived from Botswana, life after independence, which Zimbabwe achieved in 1980. Don't forget to subscribe. A Long Journey opens with a comparison of the speaker's town's history to an endless river, long and filled with suffering. The speaker describes decades of hardship, referring to the period from 1890 to 1980, when Zimbabwe was under British colonial rule. During this time, Zimbabweans suffered forced labor, violence, and oppression. The phrase "pick and shovel shambuk in jail" sums up the pain of colonial rule. Pick and shovel represent the physical labor Zimbabweans were forced to do under British rule, such as construction and land development. Shambuk is a heavy leather whip originally used as a cattle prod but later used by British colonial police to control Zimbabwean workers violently. Jail suggests both literal imprisonment and the feeling that life itself was like a prison under colonial rule. Although this painful era is over, the journey to freedom was long and difficult. The repeated word long emphasizes just how endless and exhausting the struggle for independence felt. The second stanza highlights the impact of industrialization on rural life. The motor car represents modern technology and the beginning of industrialization, which slowly replaced traditional ways of transportation, such as the sledge and the ox cart. The phrase "began to die" suggests that modernization is inevitable. Old customs and tools disappear as new technology takes over. However, before fully embracing modernity, the village experiences a transitional phase. The bicycles from Britain became a temporary fascination for young boys. This detail is significant because it shows how colonial influences shape desires. The British-made bicycle isn't just a tool for transport, it symbolizes a shift toward foreign goods and ideals, underpinning the lingering impact of colonial rule on Zimbabwean society. In the third stanza, the speaker informs us that bus routes started connecting the modern city with his remote village. The bus serves as a metaphor for modernization, breaking down the boundaries between rural and urban life. Before, villages were self-contained, but the city is now brought into the village, meaning that urban lifestyles and opportunities are becoming part of everyday rural life. The line "we began to yearn for the place behind the horizons" suggests that modernization sparks ambition and longing. People in the village start dreaming of something beyond their traditional world, perhaps a better life in the city, education, liberation, or wealth. However, this yearning also signals the beginning of cultural displacement. The village no longer feels like enough; its people are now looking beyond what their ancestors knew. The fourth stanza reflects on the difficulty of transitioning from rural life to urban, industrialized life. The contrast between bush and concrete highlights the difference between the natural, traditional world and the artificial, modern world. The word travail means hard labor or suffering, emphasizing that this change was not easy. It came with struggles, sacrifices, and perhaps even a loss of identity. The phrase "long journey" hints at how slow and exhausting this transformation was. The repetition of "long" adds emotional weight, showing that adapting to modern life was not just a physical shift but an emotional one as well. The third stanza is a reflection on how colonial history continues to shape modern Zimbabwe. The first 2 verses of the stanza explore how Zimbabwe is troubled by the past. The word "haunted" suggests that the past is not just a memory, it actively lingers and disturbs the speaker. Cave dwelling symbolizes history, possibly the pre-colonial way of life in Zimbabwe. It represents a time before colonization, when indigenous people lived according to their own customs and traditions. Hidden behind 1890 refers to the year British colonial rule began in Zimbabwe. The past is hidden because colonialism tried to erase or suppress indigenous ways of life. However, the speaker still feels its presence. The third and fourth verses of this stanza talks about the fragile illusion of luxury. The speaker now lives in the capital city, a place that represents modernity, progress, and wealth. However, they call their comfort newfound luxury, implying that it is fragile and perhaps not entirely their own. The phrase threatening my newfound luxury suggests that the speaker fears losing this comfort. Despite modernization, they feel the past creeping back, as if colonial history and ancestral struggles still influence their reality. The 5 verses of this stanza discuss the futility of escape and vulnerability. The phrase fight in nightmarish vein suggests that the speaker struggles to escape their past, but it is hopeless. The word nightmarish makes it feel like a never-ending, surreal battle. The speaker's road symbolizes their journey in life, which starts as a modern, paved path but slowly crumbles. It first turns into dusty gravel, a sign that progress is slipping away. Then it becomes overbeaten foot tracks, implying regression to an older, less developed way of life. Finally, the journey ends in a plastic hut and a mud grass dwelling, representing vulnerability. The speaker's final destination, a mud grass dwelling, is threatened by wind and rain and cold. This suggests a fragile existence, where people are literally exposed to the elements with little protection. It figuratively hints at the brutal reality that threatens stability and security. This line contrasts sharply with newfound luxury earlier in the stanza. While the speaker once thought they had security and comfort in the capital, they now realize that the haunting history and influence of the colonial past remains. The 6th stanza suggests that while people physically move away from their traditional world, the emotional and psychological impact of their past cannot be escaped. The 1st and 2nd verse of this stanza explores the escape from native beliefs. The phrase fled from witches and wizards suggests that the speaker and their people have tried to leave behind traditional beliefs, fears, and superstitions associated with rural life. This also implies that the British colonizers dismissed the native Zimbabwean culture and beliefs as mere superstitions and introduced their own reforms and so-called modern sensibilities. The long road underpins that this was not an easy transition. The repetition of long emphasizes the emotional and physical effort needed to reach the city. The 3rd verse of this stanza describes the city as a symbol of progress and illusion. The halo of tower lights represents the city's modernity, wealth, and supposed enlightenment. A halo usually symbolizes something divine or pure, suggesting that the city seems like a place of hope and progress. Tower lights symbolize hope, modernity, and the illusion of progress. However, this hope is deceptive. The speaker quickly reveals that behind these lights, darkness still lingers. The last 2 lines of this stanza reflect on the lingering horror of the past. Despite escaping rural superstitions, the speaker still hears the cry from human blood and wicked bones rattling around them. These eerie images suggest that the speaker is still haunted by past traumas, possibly related to colonial violence, ancestral suffering, or deep-rooted fears. The cry from human blood could symbolize past violence or historical injustices that have not been forgotten. Or historical injustices. Wicked bones rattling might refer to ancestral spirits or a metaphor for unresolved historical pain and suffering. The final stanza describes how the modern world is still troubled by the past. The 1st and 2nd verses of this stanza talk about the illusion of modernity. "We moved into the lights" continues the idea that the speaker and their people have embraced modern life, believing that it represents progress and safety. However, the phrase "dark periphery behind" suggests that the past is not gone, it loiters at the edges, watching and waiting. The last verse of this poem reflects on the power of control. The almighty hand could symbolize an unseen force that continues to control or influence people's lives. The past, history, ancestors, or unresolved traumas still influencing the present. Colonial power, the lingering control of colonial rule, even after independence. The hand reaching for our shirts suggests an attempt to pull them back, as if no matter how much they try to move forward, something from the past refuses to let go. Let's thematically analyze Musaemura Zimunya's A Long Journey. The poem conveys how modernization has transformed the speaker's rural Zimbabwean village, bringing both convenience and loss. The speaker sees the benefits of modern life but also mourns how industrialization has erased traditional ways of living. The disappearance of the sledge and the ox cart represents the loss of old farming methods as machines took over. The bus's arrival connects the village to the city, making people dream of life outside their ancestors' reach. Young people desire modern things, like bicycles from Britain, which symbolize mobility and choice but also a shift towards foreign influences and away from local traditions. The speaker has mixed feelings about modernization. They enjoy the comforts of city life but also feel haunted by the past. The phrase "now I am haunted by the cave dwelling hidden behind 1890" suggests a fear of losing touch with Zimbabwe's pre-colonial identity. At the same time, the speaker acknowledges a deep connection to their native country. The speaker describes fleeing from traditional beliefs, yet they still hear the cry from human blood and wicked bones rattling around me, a reminder that history and culture remain present, even when one tries to leave them behind. In the end, the poem highlights the struggle between tradition and modernity, showing how people like the speaker are caught between two worlds, the old one they inherited and the new one shaped by colonialism and industrialization. A Long Journey presents two conflicting ideas. Colonialism brought modernization, such as roads, cities, and industries. Colonialism also caused immense suffering, forcing Zimbabweans into hard labor and subjecting them to violence and oppression. The speaker describes moving from bush to concrete, showing how British rule transformed Zimbabwe's natural landscapes by building roads, removing natural vegetation, and constructing cities. However, this development came at a cost. Zimbabweans were forced to do the hard labor of construction under brutal conditions. The sjambok and jails symbolize how locals were controlled and punished. Even after Zimbabwe gained independence, the scars of colonialism remain. The speaker enjoys the newfound luxury of modern life but also hears the cry from human blood and wicked bones rattling, a haunting reminder of past violence. The poem also hints that the struggle is not over. The speaker's road runs and turns into dusty gravel, suggesting that past troubles the present progress. Hope you like and subscribe for more poem analysis.